in fact, fat phobia is an actual legitimate form of discrimination. It aligns with other types of discrimination, like around race or gender or any number of marginalized identities.
Again, compare, like...
Oh, shit. Here we go again.
Alrighty, welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for clicking on today's video. Today we are going to be going over a podcast that is from Ulta Beauty. I don't like, why would you be talking about this? But the reason we're going to be talking about is Virgie Tovar, who is a very big proponent. We've made many videos on her. A very big proponent of the health at every size, body positivity movement. She was a guest on this podcast, so we're going to be going over the first chunk of it. We're not going to go over the whole thing. The first like 20 minutes of it, I think I have some stuff to say about it. So the title of this video and podcast is The Beauty of ... Fatness with Virgie Tovar. Let's get into it.
Yes, let's get comfy.
Should I feel like shoes off for
Do you want to take your shoes off?
Right?
I'm down.
Okay,
let's take
I'm
our shoes
ready.
off.
Yeah.
Okay. My shoes are off. My shoes are off, everyone.
Free feet. All right, let's go. I'm keeping my shoes on. I'm keeping my shoes on, all right? This is work. We're getting serious now.
Hi, friends. Welcome to the Beauty of an Ulta Beauty podcast, where we talk with and learn from pioneers that are helping us redefine what beauty is and where beauty lives. I am David Lopez. I've had many titles in my life. Celebrity hairstylist, beauty content creator, general feel-good enthusiast, but today I am your host, and I'm excited to have these very beautiful conversations with some really beautiful guests. I want to let everyone know that this is a safe zone. It is a judgment-free zone where we honor curiosity and respect in all forms. I want to welcome our guest, Virgie Tovar, author, scholar, activist. Welcome.
Oh, thank you
Welcome.
for having me. Thank you.
Of course. In my research with you and following your Instagram and kind of just following your journey, there's something that's very irreverent about just your general demeanor. And I wondered, was it always that way? And in your book, You Have the Right to Remain Fat, you said in the beginning something that really stood out to me. My body used to belong to me. And in those first couple sentences that you were speaking, the joy that you had as a child, where you would kind of jiggle on the floor and like feel the weight of that, it really struck me, because through the adversity, I feel that it has transcended into where you are now in your life. You emanate joy. And it's very special to see that, especially from people who face adversity. Can you tell me a little bit more about that quote and what it means to you, my body used to belong to me, and how it led to where you are now?
Yeah, I really, like when you're writing a book, you always, that opening line is always kind of like, it's like you're looking for it, And I remember when I wrote that, and it was like, that's the opening, right? Because I think there's a universality to it, really. Like when we're children, we're all born with this incredible curiosity and self-acceptance. All the tools that we need as human beings, we have them when we're born. And then the culture kind of takes them almost. And like for me, fat phobia, which is a form of bigotry against higher weight people.
So, okay, so that's the first thing, right? So a lot of this podcast, it's very, very interesting. And when I first watched it, it is very interesting to hear this conversation and to just state as fact, right, that bigotry or that fat phobia is bigotry. And then it's compared to literally, being disabled, right? And being treated differently. What it's like to be treated differently as someone that is disabled versus someone that is fat. And just to interchange those is very interesting. And again, it's interesting because there's no pushback, right? Which I understand, right? You don't want to like argue with your guest, and who knows? I don't know what this guy believes or whatever, right? But like to just hear these are the thoughts, and this is what truly is believed, right? And it's not it's just very interesting. So that's like really, there's obviously a lot of this is fluff and it's like whatever. I'm not going to comment on every little thing she says, whatever, right? But there's definitely some things in this that it's like, whoa, man, this is crazy.
Is what took me out of my body, and I feel like once I learned fat phobia, I had a sense of this is my body and this is me. Like there was a separation. And when I was a kid, those two things weren't separate ever. They were one and the same. And I think the truth is like that was all of us on some level, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. In the journey for myself, and it's not something I talk about all the time, but one of my earliest memories of going into puberty was my relationship with my body and family members kind of pinching my belly or especially in Hispanic culture, the kind of overt commentary about your weight always. It's just like a very natural thing. And now going into how that phobia transcends into all parts of your life. Just for people who are listening, can you talk more about the difference between maybe fat phobia and fat activism and maybe the intersections between the two?
Yeah, so fat phobia is a form of bigotry, right? And a lot of people don't know that because we've been taught.
But a lot of people don't know that because a lot of people would disagree that it is that. So that might be why,
that our attitudes towards higher weight people are rightfully negative because of health reasons. Right. And so we've got this, I could go into this for a million years. I will parenthetically say that our notion of health is deeply flawed, problematic, and kind of living in the 1800s. Like the BMI was
and this is whenever we talk about health at every size people in these conversations, and I always have to say this, there's things that I agree with. And they're definitely, especially now in the Instagram era, TikTok era, we have a really skewed version of what health is and what it means to be healthy, right? Absolutely. But again, this stuff is just brought too far in my opinion, and I just disagree. It's like there's like things in the middle that I'm like yeah, I understand and I agree with that and I can see how that's true, but then to just like push it to these extremes, I'm like, okay, well I can't, I just disagree,
invented in the 1800s, okay?
By European men.
By like this Belgian mathematician. He wasn't even a physician, and he ended up becoming the grandfather of eugenics. So like just to contextualize how we're defining health, it's by a Belgian mathematician from 1830.
Right.
Who was the grandfather.
So with this, like, I think anyone that has BMI is not the end all be all, and like doctors, I truly believe this, that only use it are like literally being negligent because there's so much that goes into BMI, right? There's so much more than just BMI is what I mean. Like technically, if we looked at my BMI, I'm still technically obese, right? For my height and weight. Do I think that I am in any trouble because of my weight? No. But again, it is just a tool. There are people that I respect that are doctors that specialize in obesity that they're like, yeah, BMI is not the end all be all, but it is it's one thing that we can use, right? And so when people like bring it up and say like, it's the BMI, see, it's all pointless. It's just like, oh my gosh, I've just heard this so many times.
Of eugenics. So, end parentheses. So right? Like, in fact, fat phobia is an actual legitimate form of discrimination. It aligns with other types of discrimination, like around race or gender or any number of marginalized identities.
Again, comparing it to racism is insane to me. Like, I cannot even fathom having the balls to compare it. That is insane to me. It is not the same. I'm sorry. Not at all. Not at all. Like, not even close, man. Like that.
In the sense that, it's largely a belief system that isn't really based in evidence or data or science, but that is socially condoned and creates an idea of some people are better than others.
So again, this is like, it's not based in science. Like to say that there is no negatives to being obese, right? To having an excess of body weight is ridiculous, right? Again, and I am the person that says that some people take it too far and say, like, if you're even 30 pounds overweight, that you need to lose weight, or it's like this terrible thing. No, I don't agree with that. I think you can absolutely be technically overweight and still be completely healthy. And a lot of times, some people like that are healthier than the people that are skinny, right? I'm not that person that's like, you have to be super fit to be. No. But to act like you can be 100, 200 pounds overweight and see zero issues medically is ridiculous. Like, just think about the movement. Like, when I was 360, the amount of stuff I could not do because of my weight that had nothing to do with society and how other people treated me and all of this, to say that there was nothing that weight did that caused me pain and misery is ridiculous. Like, it's ridiculous.
Right. And so fat phobia manifests in a lot of different ways, like everything from a wage gap, like plus size women make $9,000 to $19,000 less per year than straight size women. There's also well documented medical discrimination and things like, things we all know, like how
the medical discrimination. Again, this is the one thing that I agree with the most and that I think is absolutely so sad, right? Because I think all of us, I'm not going to comment on the wage gap thing. I don't know enough about that. Okay. I'm just going to put that out there. But with the medical, like being treated bad, I know for myself, when I was bigger, I hated going to the doctors. I was treated terribly. I had very bad experiences, which only made me not want to go to the doctors more, so that is very true. And I think that there are more and more doctors now that are realizing, hey, we need to figure this out. We need to, make it more comfortable for people to be here. Because if we're talking about people that, and I believe that being overweight, significantly overweight, is negative to your health, to make them afraid and nervous and anxious to go to the doctor, clearly that's not the best thing to do, right? And so I agree with that. But again, there's just so much stuff that's layered on top of it that I'm like, oh my God, dude.
How higher weight people are considered less appealing partners, less appealing dates. So there's all these different, obviously fashion, like there's all different ways that fat phobia manifests. And it's legal in 48 out of 50 states. So just to be clear, like you can be overtly fired for your weight and get in absolutely no trouble in 48 out of 50 states.
So here, that in and of itself sounds pretty crazy, and you're like, wow, that's really, really wrong, and that shouldn't be happening, right? If you're working a desk job and they're saying like you're fired because you're too fat, that's definitely wrong. But a lot of jobs require, I might sound mean, but a lot of jobs require you to be able to move in a certain capacity and be able to do certain things, right? My first job that I ever had was at the Vans shoe store, okay? And we had to climb up ladders literally all day, because in the back, that's where there are racks of shoes, and you had to climb up and down ladders. And I was able to do it. Luckily, I think because I was young at the time, I was 19, 20 years old. And even younger, I think. And so I was able to climb up. But there was one time when I fell off the ladder, and I remember the ladders had a a weight limit of 250, and I was like, your boy's 100 pounds over that, and it was tough, right? And so I understand if a job has a set, hey, you need to be able to do this, and say maybe when you first got the job you were able to, but then you've gained weight over time, that's a hard situation, bro. That is a hard situation. But in my opinion, there are absolutely times where if your weight is making it so you cannot do these things, employers are just supposed to be like, damn, well, I guess, what's supposed to happen, man? I'm sorry, this is the real world. If you can't do your job, you can't do your job, right? But again, it's situational. If you're working a desk job, you should, what does being overweight have, anything to do with that, right?
So that's that. Fat activism is sort of the response to fat phobia. It's essentially kind of an intersectional politic that looks at fat phobia and says, this is wrong. There's nothing wrong with being fat. This is totally a natural part of body diversity. Yes, fat people have thriving, wonderful, beautiful lives. Yes, fat people are desirable. And absolutely, fat people should be protected from things like medical discrimination and the wage gap. So like that's what those two things are. Like, one is the problem and fat activism is the response. And I think I want to say, right, like our current cultural attitude is that the solution to fat phobia is for fat people to become thin people. And we were never, I'm not a thin person. There's not secretly a thin person inside of me. There's, you know what I mean? Like, there's this.
So again, right here, there's some truth to this, right? I believe, and I was just talking about this on stream, that a lot of the times we just be like, to deal with fat people, they just need to lose weight. That is not the only answer, right? That is a piece of the puzzle. I think wanting to lose the weight and putting in the work is one piece of the puzzle, but clearly this answer that the fitness industry and a lot of people have said, just lose weight, it ain't working, right? There are more and more and more and more fat people every year. Okay, so that ain't working. So we need to look at the bigger picture. I agree to an extent on this point, right? If we're only saying fat people need to stop being fat, we've been doing that and it ain't working. So there's more to it, right? But again, just because we agree on some things, there's quite a bit of stuff that we don't.
Prevailing myth, and this is so important, right? Even people who understand what fat phobia is and really don't want to perpetuate ideas of fat phobia, they might still believe that a fat person is secretly a thin person. And that I'm really here to like dismantle it. So I see like the culture is like, oh, solution to fat phobia, just try and force and bully every fat person to become a thin person. And fat activism says, no, you do not blame the individual who's experiencing discrimination for the discrimination. You end the discrimination.
Yeah.
So this is a lot of the crux of how I think in her mind she is able to compare, fat phobia to racism, right? Because it's like you cannot change that you're fat, right? There's not a skinny person inside. So it's like you can't change your skin color, right? If you're a black dude, you can't just decide to become white, right? Kind of thing. And so this is really, I believe, how she is able to make that connection and not feel absolutely ridiculous, right? I obviously disagree, because guess what? I used to be 400 pounds and I am no longer that anymore. So to say that I don't want to say that there is a skinny person, because I hate that that is just a gross way to even put it. So I absolutely disagree with that. But I do believe that if you are fat, you are not doomed to be fat for the rest of your life. And what's frustrating about this, a lot of what Virgie Tovar does is everything that she says, she has rose-tinted glasses. Sometimes she wears rose-tinted glasses literally in interviews, right? Where it's like, oh, everything is great. It's like, dude, your life might be going fine and you're obviously making a ton of money doing all of these appearances and making books and all this stuff is working out really well for you. But there are a lot of people that don't have a lot of money, that are struggling a lot, that are having a lot of medical issues that are related to their weight, that are having all of these genuine issues going on, that don't have all of this luck that you seem to have, that don't have all of this, this exposure, this money, all of these features, all of this stuff that you seem to have, and that are really struggling, right? There are people out there that are diabetic, that are struggling with their blood sugar, that are struggling with all of these things that are severely related to their weight, joint problems, all of this stuff, right? That are going to see this and they're going to think, why am I not happy? Why can't I? It's ridiculous. Like the amount of people that can fit into this narrow, tiny box that like Virgie Tovar seems to fit in and is trying to get other people. It's just not true. It's not reality,
You spoke on a couple things there that really stood out to me. One is just really we're looking at different layers where fat phobia exists. We're talking about the interpersonal layers, how we relate to it and how it shows up in our lives as a cisgendered, queer, gay man, our whole identity revolves around like, let's be as fit as possible, thin as possible, be as desirable as possible. Fat phobia. We're looking at the system like you're talking about. We love seeing magazine covers of what you said, a fat celebrity, for lack of a better word, that now has lost 100 pounds. We love to see that. Oh, so we knew it. It's like the psychology of it is like, see, I knew it. I knew that skinny person was always inside there. Now look at them, how happy they must be.
So again, I obviously don't have a problem with that. I do think that to an extent, sometimes it is overly celebrated where people will do things that are unhealthy to get that, that weight loss, especially celebrities, right? Because they're in the public eye and we've all heard the stories of, the person that lost weight and they were actually really, really unhealthy and it was a really dangerous thing that they did to lose weight, right? We've all heard that. But again, this is where it always comes down to, just because something has the potential to be bad, right? Someone can overdo the weight loss. They can do it in a really unhealthy way. Just because something has the potential to be bad, it should be shunned in all aspects. I just disagree, right? There are times where it is good and someone has done a good thing in their life by losing the weight and they are happy about doing that, right? So to just turn it into like, if you ever show someone losing weight, that's fat phobic and that's terrible, right? People calling me fat phobic because I lost the weight. People calling me fat phobic because I try and help people lose weight. That's where I just think it's too far, right? If someone is happy that they lost weight, just let them be happy. Why are you making them feel bad for doing something that was obviously probably pretty difficult for them to do?
So systemically, we still perpetuate this. The system of gyms, of diets that are not seen as diets. Like, I'm going to get a juice cleanse. And it's like, oh, that's healthy. I'm doing it for health reasons. But really, are you doing it to control weight in some way? And then there's, of course, the institutionalized
Juice cleanses are stupid. Don't do them.
forms of fat phobia that you said, how it's illegal, the inherent bias, medical inherent bias, all these ways that it shows up and how it really starts to open your mind about the decisions you make about your body. Now, if I were to take a Venn diagram where we say on one side is health and one side is fat, and where people see fat and they see it as unhealthy, where do those converge in the middle? Because I know plenty of people that would, according to a BMI index or according to a doctor, oh, they're overweight, they're obese, but they can run a mile faster than I can, or more flexible than I am. They're more healthy in the way that we consider health to be healthy. Where do you see the intersection really? What is your definition of health?
Yeah, that's really complicated, right? I think I want to talk about that question, but I want to start by saying that no one has to be healthy. No, right? Like, I mean, it's like, no, like there is no governing body that's like out there putting, you know what I mean? It's like no one owes anybody that in either the traditional sense of the word or.
This is such a non-answer, dude. No one has to be healthy. Bro, what are you talking about? Okay? What? You know what? I'm gonna start going to the hospital and be like, bro, why are you taking this medicine? Why are you doing that CAT scan? Why you don't have to be healthy? Why are you doing that? Come on. You don't have to be healthy. Stop with all that. What are you? It's like
any other more innovative or, more politicized, maybe even version of that word. So I think it's important to say like, and I want to back up and bring in intersectionality and say like, right, like look at the disabled community, right? Like I think people with disabilities have.
What are you doing?
And activists within that space have consistently been saying like, I'm never going to be your notion of healthy. That doesn't mean I don't get to be a full human. You get to treat me some kind of way, right? And so I think that I love.
Again, the way that she is able to say this and not feel like she is absolutely off her rocker is because she 1000% believes it is impossible impossible to lose weight. She believes that, right? That's the only way that you can make this connection to compare being overweight to being literally disabled, right? You don't got a leg or something. Comparing being overweight to that is so unbelievably stupid, but also rude, and is so delusional that it shows this person lives in their own la la land, Virgie land, okay? That's where she lives. It ain't the real world, folks, okay? So we need to understand this person, their brain is somewhere else. Because it is insane to make that connection. Insane.
Of taking that principle within disability rights to fat activism and to understandings of fatness. So I want to start there, right? Like, no matter what size you are, you don't owe anybody else your health. But I mean, for me, right, like in an ideal world where, like in an ideal world, there wouldn't be health-based gatekeeping at all. But let's take a step back and say, okay, like I want to redefine the notion of health. In my mind, it's a very expansive notion that takes into account spiritual health, that takes into account, do you have community? Do you feel like, I mean, like one of the things that fat phobia does, just like a lot of other marginalized, you know, like phobias and like different kinds of discrimination, is it creates a sense that you don't belong in your own society. That it's essentially like, I use the metaphor of the family. Like when you're in a marginalized body or have a marginalized identity, it's kind of like when your parents sort of kick you out of their house. Mm-hmm. So for me, right, like I always go back to notions of like what we know that humans need is they are connection, acceptance, love, comfort, affirmation, right? We know this is what we give to children. That's what every human being needs. And so anything that isn't in that wheelhouse isn't promoting health in my mind. And I want to bring in like actually like a friend who's a PhD in nutrition, and she brought up this incredible question to me, and she was like, if science isn't serving humanitarian ends, then what is the point that we're doing? Like, what's the point of it, you know? And it's like,
if science isn't making me feel good, why are we doing it? You know? If science doesn't make me feel warm and fuzzy inside, why are we talking about it? So now we have switched, all right? We have switched from the science doesn't say this is true to what's the point? You know? Hey, that science makes me feel bad. Why are we even looking at that? You know? It makes me feel bad inside. That science is stupid and we're moving on from it. Okay? That's where we've gone now.
right, because are we making science for aliens? For like some, I mean, like, what are we, you know what I'm saying? It's like, so if by our scientific notion of whatever health is right now, if that's excluding 68% of the population, which is like the plus size population, if that's excluding 70-ish% of the US population, then it's not working.
It's not working. It's not working. No, I mean, you took us all.
What are you talking about? It's not working. What are you talking about? It's the science. What we need to do is figure out how to help more people with losing weight and getting in a healthier position. I don't
all to church. I'm shook. I'm gooped. I'm gagged in every sense of the word. There's something that I wanted to touch on there, because when we talk about autonomy over our bodies, we talked a little bit before about how this intersects with gender. And there's a lot of parallels there, I feel like, with the trans community, queer community, even in some ways my own expression of my gender. You know, it feels very much like there are a lot of parallels there.
Yeah. And
we even talk a little bit about the racial intersection there. Can you tell us a little bit how fat phobia has those parallels and how they intersect with gender and race?
Yeah, I mean, to begin with,
I'm sure she'd love to share with you, my friend.
Entry point to this work was examining how weight discrimination and racism impacted how I see and experience my own gender and how I perform my own gender. It started there because, and it was really interesting, right? Because I was, all of my work, which started about 12 years ago, it sort of started with a conversation I had with a friend I grew up with. And she said, do you remember when we were little and how you were always expected to play the boy whenever we were play acting?
Really?
Yeah. Whenever we were play acting, like stories from the Babysitter's Club or from books that were...
Babysitter's Club.
Yes. Yeah. Heterosexual romances.
Yeah.
In which I am being expected to play the boy 100% of the time, and it's not even discussed.
It's finding something, right? It's like searching in your past, and it's like, how can I make this part of my personality? How can I make this into trauma that I can use to sell a book? That's what's going on.
It's like there's not even consent or discuss. It's just like understood that as the largest bodied girl that I'm supposed to play the boy, right?
Oh, God.
And I mean, yes, you remember this?
This is everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
Course.
So I had, and I was like, oh my God, I had completely suppressed or forgotten that memory. And then a bunch of stuff started to flood back. So like when I was a little girl, I had a ton
You forgot it because it wasn't a big deal, you know?
of gender confusion because, right, like, and when we think about gender is complicated, right? There's an internal sense of gender, but there's also a social sense of gender. Like when I throw the ball, are you throwing the ball back?
Speaking of throwing balls, my whole life, it was like, you throw like a girl, you talk like a girl, you walk like a girl, you sit like a girl. I'm like, what does that even mean, sit like a girl? And then what does that do? It has internalized misogyny. Well, I don't want to be that.
Right, 100%. Yeah, because the most humiliating, quote unquote, thing you can be as a masculine person is a feminine person.
Yes.
And it's so deep because like people don't even realize that that's what they're condoning. But as a little girl, like I had a deep understanding of myself as a girl. I identified as a girl. I adhered with that. But I wasn't getting any of the social cues back. So let me break that down. It's like, so for example,
Someone in my chat just said, as a trans guy, I'm lost as to what she's trying to compare. Yeah, welcome to the club.
I was growing up watching, cartoons like The Little Mermaid and like all like, right, like, and I was watching girls get treated like delicate flowers, like desirable love objects, right? I wasn't getting any of that. So that, not there. Another thing that I wasn't getting affirmation on was clothing. There was nothing ever for me in the girls section. So I'm like, if there's nothing for me in the section that has my title of my gender, then what is that? What gender am I? Then what am I? And then I think, right, like,
So again, like it's just interesting. Like, yeah, there's nothing in the girls section because you're fat. So you have to go to the women's section. There was nothing in the boys section for me. I had to shop men. Like, it just like, dude,
especially around socialization, my peers were treating me more in line with kind of masculinity, both in the like romantic sense of like I always had to play the boy. I mean, like literally it was.
Then you're like the buddy. You're like always the buddy. It's
totally.
Like, yeah.
I mean, I remember like 1 year, 4th grade, every single recess, the entire academic year, my best friend at the time, Lorna, who was really small, we reenacted this romance from the Babysitter's Club, and it was just like it was. And as an adult, I'm just like, oh my God, like I would pick her up and make her feel dainty, which was such a huge part, right? Like that's another thing. I was never dainty. And that's so aligned with hetero femininity and just like successful femininity in general, right? The way that our culture thinks of it. And so I wasn't getting any of the social cues back. And so
like you weren't dainty. Like you weren't getting picked up because like, I'm not trying to be mean, but if your friend was tiny, they probably couldn't, right? Like I'm not even saying that this stuff doesn't happen. Like I went through stuff when I was bigger as a kid. Like we all get bullied, right? Like bullying sucks. I 100%. But again, I'm not sitting here being like, we should bully kids. Yeah, brother. That's not what I'm saying. Okay. I want to make that very clear. But to go from that to be like, that's why being fat, actually, there's nothing wrong with it at all, and we should all be super fat and like shouldn't even worry about it. Like that's where I'm like, whoa, pump the brakes here, Turbo. Let's bring it back a little bit.
so I was very confused about my gender. And then as an adult, the way that I dealt with that is that I started to double down, like be like, you are not going to, I mean, I don't quite want to say misgender because that's not exactly what was happening, but like, you are not going to push me into masculinity. I had to articulate very aggressively, I am a woman, I am feminine, and I'm authentic, right? And I think that for me as a fat woman and a brown woman, that meant like, almost like taking femininity to like 100,
high extreme,
like 11 all the time, like with my hair, my makeup, and I always had to wear a dress and my boobs were always out. And like, it was, you know what I mean? And like, I think like
literally same.
Yes, yes. And it's like, there's something really beautiful about that. And there's also something frustrating about feeling like you're pushed against a wall and that's the only way that you're going to be seen authentically in your gender.
Yeah.
And so that was what everything started for me, was like, going back, remembering the suppressed memories of like, oh my God, I had a ton of gender confusion. And then I did research in graduate school on this issue, and I talked to other women of color who have always been fat, and they had the same experiences and dealt with it in different ways. Like some double down on being extra feminine, some double down on being masked. And like, you know, especially some of the queer women I talked to, like they found that they had a sexual advantage in being in a bigger body and being more masculine.
So again, like I'm not saying that this experience isn't something that she experienced or anything like that, or people haven't. Hey, we all went through stuff as kids. We all had issues. We all had people that were mean to us. I'm not saying that stuff's not true, but again, it's connecting these things and being like, that's why this whole movement exists and why everyone. Like, come on, dude. Like, we all go through stuff, absolutely. And things can be hard as kids, and things can be tough, and trying to figure stuff out, and all of that stuff, absolutely, right? But again, it's just like everything, if you forgot, I don't know. I'm just going to keep playing.
You know? So I think I was like fascinated to sort of see the way that gender, like, right, like you wouldn't necessarily think that gender would be a way that people deal with fat phobia, but it is, you know?
Fully. In my own gender expression, my gender fluidity, as you're speaking, so when I think about how that trickles down into my experience, where I wanted to double down on what people say I should look like, then I became even more femme. I mean, you've seen my Instagram. I just like fully, like I want you to see it all, the chest hair and the muscles and the hair and this and the mannerisms. Like I want to blend it all together. So it's interesting that we choose to double down on these concepts and say, no, I'm not going to let someone make this my story. I'm going to create my own and my own version of it. And I think it's why your story resonates with so many people. And I think that's where a lot of your joy comes from, because you're doubling down.
So I don't even necessarily disagree with a lot of the stuff we're talking about, like with gender and stuff, and like the norms that we have, and like that's a whole nother topic. But again, to then be like, it's on the same level as fat phobia. I'm sorry, but I just disagree. Like, I'm sorry. They are so different. To try and connect them, I feel like it's like trying to fit a square, a cube into a circle hole. It's like, if I just shove it in there and try and twist it, and like, that's what it feels like is happening right now. It's like I'm trying to find any sort of connection I can make to make it work. And I'm sorry, I just disagree.
Down in your true authentic self. And it's so beautiful and powerful. There is a question that I had when I was researching this. The word fat itself, it's like uncomfortable sometimes for people to say.
Yeah.
You know, you have said I am fat or fat phobia, like all these things. But for some people, it's almost like I feel like my fat phobia doesn't even allow me to say the word fat.
Right.
I'm afraid to say it.
Yeah, 100%.
So when did you stop seeing the word fat as a bad word and take the power back into that?
Yeah, I mean, I think like, the complexity around the feeling, it's important to be curious about that. Yeah. You know what I mean? And I love that you pointed out that it is fat phobia. It's like it's the idea that to be fat is unspeakable. And that's what makes it so complicated. Yeah, I love that you brought that up.
Say that again, to be fat. To say, it's just, I need everyone to, that's that little quote, to be fat is unspeakable.
Right. 100%. And that's where that discomfort comes from, you know? But like, I think for me, it's been like reclaiming that word has been a slow process. I remember like a slow process. I remember even in like high school, I had one with my best friend. I started to use that word, and it was like a
Stuff like this is always hard because it really depends on the person. Like there are some people that like if you call them fat, they don't mind, but there are some people if you call them fat, it really hurts their feelings, right? It just like it really depends on the person. So like these conversations, it's just like, dude, like she might be fine with it, but like if she had a friend that wasn't cool with it and she called them fat, they'd probably have their feelings hurt. And like that doesn't make them like, oh, they're fat phobic because their feelings are hurt by being called fat. That's just like, it's been treated as a negative word. So to feel negative about it is not like
secret word between us where like we would play a game where we would talk about anything that had gone wrong, and it would be like, oh, it's because I'm fat. Like it was like, and then we were kind of like playing, you know what I mean? We were kind of
I do that
playing
too with gay.
with
I'm like, well, because I'm gay. Totally.
It's like, you know when the fire alarm went off?
Yeah.
Because I'm fat.
Yeah, it's raining. Well, because like you're gay. That's why.
Yeah.
I get it. I totally get it.
And it was like this way of kind of, you know, I think that we like do that as the way to like diffuse and deal with like the stigma and reclaim some part of it.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. I used to do the same thing too, but it was just self-depreciation. Like I made fun of myself all the time when I was bigger. That's what I did. I don't, it's just like a lot of times it's like these things that are very normal for people to do. And it's like, the reason is because of this and that and this. And if you connect this over here, if you put this over here and you turn around and do the hokey pokey and then you put this over here, and that's why you do it. It's like, dude, nah, just some of us do stuff.
I think like entering fat activism in my like early 30s and maybe late 20s, that was really the turning point for me, because I think that, you know, fat activism at that time, like in 2010, 2011, was I mean, it still is in many ways, but at that time it was like so insular, was small, super queer, super femme, like led, you know? Yeah. And I think that what was amazing about it was that like it pulled from the tradition of not only like the Black Power movement, but also like gay liberation, in the sense that it was like, no, I don't just want you to accept me. I want you to see me living my absolute best life. And I think that that was for me to not only...
And that's where the issue is. We've already talked about comparing it to race and stuff like that, but that's where the issue is it's people... A lot of people that are really popular in the fat acceptance, body positive movement, they are spreading false positivity, right? They're spreading this narrative of I'm always happy, I have no issues and nothing's going wrong, because they're like afraid to share any sort of negative feeling they might have. They're afraid to share any sort of like you know, negativity at all. So it's just this false positivity. It's this, you know, toxic positivity that has gotten really, really into the fat positive movement that is just unrealistic. So it's like, if you feel bad about your weight at all, it's like, well, you're not actually fat positive. And that, I think, causes harm to people.
Be coming hat in hand to a culture that, you know, hates me for being fat and asking to be seen as probably still subhuman or partially human or whatever, right? That was never appealing to me. And when I was introduced to the possibility that I could be kind of like loud and proud and fabulous and like an 11, like that has always appealed to me. And for me, reclaiming that word was really about taking the power back, right? Because I think, like, you know, to go back to the unspeakable, like when I don't identify as fat, the power in the situation, if it's like a thin person, the power resides in their court, right? They get to throw down that word whenever they want to put me in my place. And when I start out the conversation with like, I'm fat, it's like, I'm like, I took that card off the table. You can't play that card. Yeah. And so the power dynamic between us has shifted. And so I think like, I love that stuff. Like I love to play with like little micro interactions. Me too. And like, dig, right? Like kind of like a little bit of like a gender scholar, a little bit of a linguistic scholar. I'm like, how can I do this tiny little word that has been used and weaponized against me? I have now taken it out of your artillery and it's in my artillery.
And now I'm making a ton of money by making a ton of books and doing all of these appearances because of it, you know? Awesome. But the rest of it is it's not worth even going over. I've said everything that I want to say. Again, this stuff is, for me, it's just so frustrating. And the thing is oh man, the comments, the reaction to this, even the community that they're sharing this with don't agree. Like if you go and like read all of these comments, like this one right here. I can't believe she just compared herself to actual disabled people. Weight can absolutely be lost in multiple ways. There's no cure for permanent disabilities, right? So the people that this is for aren't even agreeing. Like it's really hard to find a comment where people are like, yeah, I definitely agree, right? So again, this is a very, very, very small group of people that are trying to make this thing, you know, more mainstream. And most people, because they have common sense, disagree, right? Disagree. And that's where I land. I disagree. There are some things that I agree with. Most of the stuff I disagree with. So with that being said, let me know your thoughts. What do you think? Down in the comment section down below, let me know. If you enjoyed this video, thumbs up. Really helps the channel out a lot. I would really appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching the video, and I'll see you next time. Peace.